I'd like to introduce you to one of our personalities here in Phoenix, Arizona, the owner of Fast Forward Superchargers, Tom Van Dan Elson. We got a supercharger to look at. He's going to show us the kit on the table, and then we're going to take a look at the kit on the car. Afterwards, we'll take a test drive with Dave. What do you think of that, Dave? Good idea? All right. Let's go inside. I'd like to introduce you to Tom Van Dan Elson, president and owner of Fast Forward Superchargers. Good to have you here, Tom.
Thank you, Mike.
Good to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Tom's done a lot of R&D work here at Mike's place on his Fast Forward Supercharger system.
Actually, that's being a little understated. We did all the R&D work here at Mike's.
Well, I'm sure we did some of it. He's a good fibber, too. Tom, would you tell us a little bit about your kit? And I understand that it's carb certified. And
Yes, it's the only kit out there that makes high horsepower for a Miata that's actually illegal to sell into California. There's smaller kits, and but for high horsepower, these make close to 200 horsepower legally in California. That's 200 at the wheels, not at the crank. So it's the only one out there that's California carb certified.
that sounds great. How about dependability?
Well, it's kind of proven itself in my car. My car now has about 105,000 miles with the supercharger, 135,000 miles on the engine, but about 105,000 miles with supercharged, and over 200 horsepower, and so far it still runs. It's a daily driver, it runs like a champ.
When you say it's a daily driver, do you take the car to the track too?
We've had a lot of fun with it. Over at Bondurant, we do all of our testing over there. When we make changes, we take the car over to Bondurant, hand the keys off to some of Bondurant's drivers, and they go out and play with it on their track.
Now, one of the things that I know about this kit, we installed this kit here at our shop, is that the idle quality of this kit is better than any other kit out there. It truly is a great kit.
We kind of think of the idle quality, and then we'll go back to the daily drivability thing, but the idle quality is as good or better than a stock Miata. It just idles the way it should. And but it's back to that daily drivability. You can drive it in all kinds of weather, whether it's rain or cold or hot, or out here we know about hot when we get 115 and 20 degree days. And the kit just doesn't care. And and the idle's great.
And one thing that really impresses me, Tom, about your kit is the torque factor.
The torque on our kit is really kind of good. Because it's a cold side, there's very little volume, what we call throttle volume. Throttle volume is the space that's occupied between the throttle plate and the throttle body, and the intake ports on the engine. As you can see from here, it's a very small volume. Actually, it's only about 122 cubic inches. And if you realize that a cubic foot is 1,728 cubic inches, then 122 is only about 8% of a cubic foot. So there's no space in there for the air to be compressed. So you just get instant boost and you get instant torque. Now, torque curve is basically flat with a little hump in the middle.
Ready? You got the red light on. Sounds great. Now that we're here at the car, Tom, I'd like you to show us around the car. And one point that's really important that everybody asks is, how's the gas mileage with this kit?
Well, it's actually kind of amazing, Mike. You would think that with the supercharger on there that your gas mileage would go to a pop in the basket. But it doesn't really. And in fact, in a lot of cases, the gas mileage actually increases. This car, when it was stock, got around 27 miles per gallon on the highway on a long trip as an average. I take a long trip now and I tow a trailer behind the car for luggage. And my wife and I in the car and the trailer out of bed, not full 28, 29, maybe sometimes even 30 miles a gallon. And the reason is that the engine doesn't have to work as hard. The supercharger's there to help it breathe.
Exactly. So more power turns into better gas mileage. Will you show us around the kit? I see we got the superchargers right here, and it's on the cold side, so it's actually on the intake side.
It's on the intake side. It bolts right on the intake. And one of the neat things about this kit is that you take off all of the old intake off of the car and replace it with this. And the total net gain to the car is about 18 pounds in weight, and it's on the passenger side. For those of us that like to race, that's really a pretty good deal. If you talk about a turbo or a hot side supercharger, they'll add at least 60 pounds to the car, and some will add closer to 80 pounds to the car. This only adds 18 pounds and adds it over on the passenger side where you'd like to get a little weight distribution for the driver. And the reason is because we're adding about 62 pounds to the car, but we're taking 44 pounds off, so we have about 18 pounds total.
Sounds great. So the Miata still stays the ballerina that it was meant to be?
You haven't screwed up any of your weight distribution. The Miata was about a 51-49 weight distribution stock, and with 18 pounds, you're pretty close to 51-49 now. I mean, that 18 pounds out of 2,400 pounds doesn't make a lot of difference.
Well, that really sounds great. And it really cleans up, because the intake side has always been busy, and the exhaust side, well, you don't have the heat from the exhaust heating it up.
That's correct. You've got all just cool air. We've moved the air intake down underneath the supercharger because we did thermal tests all over the engine compartment. Of course, that side of the engine compartment gets really hot when you're pushing the car hard because the exhaust is over there.
Right.
And this side of the engine compartment, everything up top by the hood, heat rises, it collects at the hood, and you have very hot air up at the top. So we moved the air intake down just underneath the supercharger, where we found it to be the coolest air we could find. Not that it's cold air, but the coolest air in the engine compartment.
I see to be carb certified, you got the Egr valve mounted right here.
Right where it was stock.
Right.
It stays in the same position. We just adapted to the intake.
And this is that EACV, the electronic idle air control valve. That's where it's located now.
And we had a vacuum distribution block because...
Oh yeah, there's the block.
Almost all of the boost kits that are on the market, Mike, like turbos and hot side supercharger kits, everything but our kit, as a matter of fact, they leave all of the vacuum lines connected to the intake manifold. And they even leave the idle air control valve connected to the intake manifold. That creates a real problem in daily drivability and idle issues because the intake manifold now sees high boost. And the idle air control valve was never designed to see anything greater than atmospheric pressure.
Right.
So we had a vacuum distribution block, and we bring it off just prior to the supercharger, so that it's like the old intake manifold. It sees vacuum when there's vacuum, but at worst case, it sees a few inches short of atmospheric pressure. It's just like a stock Miata. So the idle air control valve sees that same kind of pressure change, and it runs just like stock.
You know, Tom, with this kit, I think you've put together the best of all the worlds.
That was the goal. The goal was, as we said earlier, was to make a car that had absolute best we could do for daily drivability, and yet plenty of power to pass, and still be able to take it out on the weekend and autocross or track the car. This car has been on the full track on a lot of occasions. And to give you an instance of this, on a stock Miata at Firebird on the main track, when they're going down, there's about a 5/8 of a mile straightaway. When they go down that 5/8 mile straightaway, they typically top out around 85 miles an hour. With this car, when I hit the end of that straightaway and start to lay out for the brakes, I'm slightly over 130 miles an hour.
Whoa.
So it's a huge difference.
Whoa, that's a big difference. That's a big difference. Hey, Dave, are you ready to take a ride in this car?
Cool.
Tom,
we'll go give you the ride of your life.
There we go. Sounds great.
Buckle up.